Those are the top stories in this news edition. Hello, welcome to ETV News with the news. I'm Shimal Islamma. Chairperson of the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia, Birtukan Mideksa, affirms commitment to discharging legal responsibility in the coming general elections. The chairperson has called upon all political parties to contribute share to conduct successful election. Alula Taklamariam has more on that.
The National Electoral Board of Ethiopia is mandated to facilitate and lead the upcoming 6th general election in the country, which is scheduled to be held in the month of June. The board is thus undertaking various activities to make that happen, starting from candidates' registration to offering trainings to stakeholders. Birtukan Mideksa, the chairperson of the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia, has affirmed commitment to discharging legal responsibility in the upcoming general election.
We have been informing our progress to the public in connection with the upcoming election. It's very tiresome and requires much effort that includes operations of logistics and security issues. In this regard, we have scored commendable steps where candidates are registered and identified. Of course, there are some regional states whose reports are a bit late. Plus to that, we have set a direction where complaints are addressed in connection with the election. What makes this election different from our previous elections is its technical system supported by advanced technology. So we have dispatched experts to the field to help facilitate the process.
Birtukan outlines sorts of measures that the board may possibly take in case of challenges before, during and after the election.
Election process requires an inclusive involvement of all stakeholders. It's not left to the board alone. The government, political parties and citizens have duties in contributing share to conduct successful election. So before taking any measure, we let every stake to discharge their responsibilities. But if challenges happen during and after the election, we can take legal measures including banning candidates from the election.
Birtukan also said media organizations need to be impartial in their news coverage about the election, urging them to give equal airtime for all political parties, including the ruling party.
The victory of Adwa was not simply defeating Italy in a military operation. Rather, Adwa is a victory over racism as a whole. The remark came during an exclusive interview with a historian, Assistant Professor Abeba Iyaleu. Abeba says Adwa is a victory beyond Ethiopia's horizon. It was also an engine to fight colonialism for the rest of Africa. Jerusalem Basa has interviewed a scholar and come up with this report.
In 1896, fascist Italians were eyeing Ethiopia, having designed tricky plans to colonize the country, while other European countries had already scrambled the rest of Africa. However, Ethiopia had successfully defended its independence, and as such, Ethiopians became a beacon of hope for other African countries that were under colonial occupation. Assistant Professor of History at Addis Ababa University, Abeba Iyaleu said.
Adwa is a victory which echoed beyond Ethiopia's horizon, particularly for the rest of Africa. The year 1896 was a year in which most of the African peoples were under colonial occupation. Some of them were ruled for 30 years, some of them for 20 years, and some of them for 5 or 8 years. That was a period in which colonialism oppressed Africans in its fresh force, new force. So it was during this particular time that Adwa just gave a light and a hope for most of Africans that, look, this is something that can be, that will not last long. So in terms of becoming an example for the later African nationalist and liberation movements, it has played an immense role. and then its importance for the black population in the entire world.
According to the scholar, Adwa became an inspiration among Africans to be united for Pan-Africanism movement. Therefore, Ethiopia's role was remarkable for that initiative.
In beginning from the 1880s, there was a quest among Africans for unity at regional levels. In Eastern Africa, there were attempts to unify the resistance against the Germans or the English. In West Africa also to some extent. But later on, you see, during the liberation movement, that was in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, the need for a united African movement became clear. And Ethiopia's reference of playing a leading role in that movement emanates from Adwa. And others respected Ethiopia's involvement and leadership because of references like Adwa.
Many historians say that the victory of Adwa was not simply to defeat Italy, but it was against European imperialism. Abba agrees that, saying Adwa is a manifestation of equality among human beings.
One way or the other, the victory of Adwa was a victory over racism. It was a victory over European philosophy of men are not created equal and their own race is superior. So after almost 9 years, that was repeated also in Eastern Asia when the Japanese defeated the Russian army in 1904. So absolutely, when we think of the victory of Adwa, I agree to the point that Adwa is not a victory over colonialist military forces, and it was not simply a military victory, and rather it is a victory of equality over inequality, a victory over racism.
On February 8, 2021, a months-long celebration of the 125th Adwa victory was launched to commemorate Ethiopian sacrifice for safeguarding Ethiopia's sovereignty and to symbolize Adwa as a national pride, freedom to Africans and the black people around the globe.
Meanwhile, members of the Ethiopian Patriots Association urged the youth to glorify the sacrifices its forefathers paid during the Battle of Adwa for the entire country to live in dignity. The ultimate price that Ethiopian patriots paid is a manifestation of their bravery to live up to the notion that Ethiopia is above self, they pointed out. Solomon Danye tells us more.
Few take their Ethiopian citizenship for granted, mostly because of the lack of historical understandings about how the nation prevails this whole time. According to members of the Ethiopian Patriots Association, the land of Ethiopia is made of blood and flesh of brave patriots who proudly passed away while defending their country from foreign aggression. The world, whether interested or not, will forever remember the victory of Adwa, the rise of black patriotism. The sacrifices made in the Battle of Adwa were the ultimate price that our forefathers paid for the black race to triumph and for us to live in dignity, said these patriots.
Many have lost their precious lives while fighting bravely against the well-trained Italian army. It was mind-blowing to learn that many of our patriots were fighting with only machetes, axes and other tools they got. That sacrifice was not made for personal dignity. It was rather for the nation that we all love. No Ethiopian allows any invader to take away its sovereignty.
The unimaginable bravery that Ethiopian patriots demonstrated during any war against aggressors is a manifestation of the notion that Ethiopia is above each and every citizen it inhabits.
My elder brother lost his right eye and my mother her left breast during the war with Italy. Everybody fought bravely to defend the country's sovereignty. Ethiopia is for all of us, regardless of ethnicity. The youth should learn that the society is intermingled. No one can separate that. The generation needs to learn to come together under that beautiful flag. I don't even want to hear people say I am from this ethnicity. We should learn to live as an Ethiopian. I am totally against the notion that divides the country into ethnic lines. I urge the young generation to protect this great nation with that oneness.
Some international institutions and organizations compromised their responsibility of impartiality by serving as mouthpieces of the criminal TPLF junta, a renowned expert said. Political science and law lecturer at California State University, Professor Alemayehu Gebramariam, told local media that these international institutions proved that they are the junta's lobbyists through their stubborn calls to the Ethiopian government to negotiate with the dismantled party. Moreover, they are ignoring facts on the ground and acknowledge the junta's lobbyists' massive fake information disseminated worldwide, he stated. He adds that Ethiopian intellectuals and the diaspora community, in coordination with pertinent stakeholders and the government, should come up genuinely to counter the ongoing misrepresentation of the reality in Tigray state through different campaigns. Currently, the junta, through its various wings, is investing largely to mislead the international community. The ultimate purpose of the TPLF's apologists and lobbyists is to lengthen the dismantled group's presence, he stressed. Accordingly, the international institutions that are immersed in propagating the TPLF agenda want to see Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa disintegrated. Israel, Alon Ushpiz co-chaired the third Ethiopia-Israel political dialogue that was held virtually yesterday. The political dialogue covered a range of issues aiming to further strengthen economic and people-to-people engagements as well as political relations. The meeting recalled the agreements between the two countries to jointly work on horticulture, cybersecurity, investment, space science, energy supply, and peace and security. The two sides also discussed ways to create linkages among agricultural institutions of the two countries and strengthen development projects implemented. The meeting also discussed challenges of the new political administration in Ethiopia and its reform process, the upcoming general elections, the law enforcement campaign in the Tigray region, and the efforts in the ongoing humanitarian assistance. Ethiopia also affirmed the country's unwavering belief in the AU-led tripartite talks on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and its commitment to peacefully resolving the Ethiopia-Sudan border dispute.
Policy Matters is a conversation platform which aims to provide reasoned analysis and context to the activities, reforms, and policies of the federal government of Ethiopia. Exploring various reforms the government is undertaking, the conversation platform aspires to enable nuanced and informed understanding.
Okay, so just to clarify, out of the several dozen state enterprises, this new initiative is covering 7 of them. And it is partly because most of the others will have the capacity to repay their debt. Is that correct?
Yes, okay. And also we are not taking. In addition to that, we are not taking all of their debt.
Yes.
Assessment has been made how much they can able to pay and what they cannot able to pay. Some of them, for example, they can able to pay significantly. So we leave them out of the exercise, and some they cannot totally able to repay because of their unique nature.
The new corporation being created is intended to solve the SOE's debt problem itself, but at the same time also addressing the banking system's stability, and at the same time ensuring that the debt repayments do not come to the budget.
Overall, the central government debt level, debt stock to GDP, is healthy in terms of Ethiopia's debt, and even the debt stock to GDP ratio is declining a little bit, which is as a result of all the reform and restructuring of some international debt we have already did with some creditors. So the weak link was debt service to export ratio, and that will be addressed by broader homegrown economy reform program, and this exercise will also significantly improve it. And as a result of that, Ethiopia has huge potential in terms of population size, market size, resources, and geographic locations. The right policies are now in place. With this all comprehensive reform, we are working so that Ethiopia will be the best destination for investment.
The Ethiopian Broadcast Authority says the revised media laws help promote responsible and free media. The authority said this during the discussion held on the revised media proclamation, as well as the hate speech and fake news proclamations. Entire Tamrat has more on that.
The discussion shed the spotlight on the fact that the former media-related laws do not allow the media to operate with freedom. In this regard, Ethiopian news agency witnesses how the previous media law weakened it because the law favored political wills rather than media professionalism.
Ethiopian news agency had a 79-year journey in the media industry, but it has lost a great deal during this time. Even it was dissolved and now it is competing with new media. But the current proclamation is conducive and it can strengthen the agency. The proclamation helps us to compete with other media and act independently and with freedom.
With the revised media proclamation now, the country has shown the will to let the media operate without political influence. To this end, the country's broadcast authority wants to support the media industry, but needs tax and investment incentives.
The government has shown commitment by putting in place a clear investment policy for the sector. Tax incentives as stated in the policy. We are currently holding talks with respected entities to translate the policy into action. We have, for instance, talked to Investment Commission and Revenue Ministry. We also have a plan to talk to the National Bank regarding currency issue. I call upon you media practitioners to add some pressure here.
The discussion also indicated that the revised media law equally applies to licensed media outlets that are operational locally and abroad. It also brought together heads of media institutions, media practitioners, and members of the parliament, among others.
The Ministry of Health announces that it is set to cut maternal mortality rate by half. The ministry made remark at a consultative forum held with Ethiopian Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists on the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic on the health services. On the occasion, Health State Minister Daraja Duguma said the prevalence of the pandemic has jeopardized the reproductive health system. He recalled contribution of Ethiopian Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists in addressing impacts of the pandemic on maternity and children health care sphere and reducing maternal mortality rate. The State Minister further said that the ministry or the Health Ministry has been undertaking work to reduce maternal mortality rate by half. Private and public institutions and stakeholders have been urged to collectively work to achieve the plan.